Welcome to the Wired for Success podcast, your show for ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneurs who want to build million-dollar businesses without sacrificing their health, relationships, or happiness, who understand that in order to build their empire, they need a solid foundation, and that the more they are thriving, the more their business is thriving too. This show brings you the very best from science, self-development, and entrepreneurship to set you up for sustainable success. Hi, I'm Claudia Garbutt, the scientist turned mindset and high performance coach for entrepreneurs, and I help you get wired for success. Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Wired for Success podcast, where we talk about all things science, self-development, and entrepreneurship that help you get to that next level of success in your life and business. And my guest today is Lance Cayko. And Lance is a multi-talented entrepreneur, architect, builder, and a fellow podcaster. He co-founded F9 Productions, a successful design and build firm in Colorado, specializing in residential and small commercial projects. Lance is an active member of his community, a professional fisherman, and founder of Longmont Community Gardens, a nonprofit promoting urban sustainable gardening and education. He also lectures at the University of Boulder and co-hosts Inside the Firm, a popular podcast providing insights and advice on architecture, entrepreneurship, and small business ownership. So welcome, Lance, and thank you so much for being on my show today.
Claudia, thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor to be here. I'm happy to share my stories and everything else with your audience.
I'm really looking forward to that. So why don't we start with how you built 3 7-figure businesses from scratch? Can you tell us a little more about those businesses and the journey of building them?
Yeah. So the 3 companies that Claudia is talking about is F9 Productions, which is my primary business, the one that's probably the oldest, and that is our architecture firm. And then the second one is F12 Productions, and that was our real estate development firm, which is now just basically a holding company, but it did generate the 7-figure mark when we went through the development, building a triplex and a sixplex here in Longmont, Colorado. And then the third is what was born out of both of those, which is our contracting company. So we are also general contractors and carpenters with F14 Productions. My journey started for entrepreneurship when at the ripe old age of 13. So I'm 40 years old as of today in this recording. But I tried farming with my dad for one summer. So I grew up in Northwest North Dakota, a very rural part of the United States. And we farmed sugar beets and durum. So durum is just wheat. And I tried doing it for about a week with my dad. And we didn't really get along that well back then. We get along a lot better today. But the biggest thing for that was that the hours were horrible. You were waking up in the middle of the night to go remove the irrigation systems, and the mosquitoes would try to pick you up and carry you away. I mean, they were as big as birds up there, and I just hated it. And I told my dad, I said, I don't think this is for me. What do you? And he said, well, you got to do something. And I said, you're right, obviously. I have to. I believe in the strong Protestant work ethic and all of that. And he wanted to make sure he instilled that in his children. And so I called his best friend up that night, his name is Bruce Falcon. He was a general contractor in Williston, North Dakota, a little town about 10 miles from where I grew up. And I said, hey, I've always been interested in contracting and in carpentry and everything construction. Do you have any openings? I said, I'll do whatever it takes. And he said, yeah, we just got a big contract. We're gonna do 80 roofs this summer. We're gonna tear them off and put them back on in one day. We're gonna wake up super early, 4 or 5 a.m. We're gonna have them put back on by like 2 or 3 p.m. And you can be my gopher. I'll pay you $7.25 an hour, and you can go for this and go for that. When you're done going for the things, you can come up on the roof and you can learn how to lay shingles and do all of that process. And I said, sold. I was the best darn gopher that he ever had. And so by the end of the summer, I knew how to tear off, put on a roof, and learn that new skill. And I just loved every part of the construction process, from the camaraderie with the guys, waking up that early, the super hard work, being dirty, all of that kind of stuff. And then just being able to see the progress that happens in a day of construction. And so what I did is he taught me a couple valuable lessons. One thing he said, I can't even remember when exactly it happened in that summer, but it made everything click for me. So I don't come from a background of a lot of other entrepreneurs. I come from a background of like, my mom is still working for the same dental clinic for the past 40 years. My dad sacrificed a lot just to keep the farm alive. That was his dad's farm, essentially. And then just kind of worked odd jobs after that, after the farm went defunct. But Bruce was the only entrepreneur that I knew early on in my career. And he said something to me one day, and that was, he goes, I pay you $7.25 an hour. How much do you think I charge the customers? And I go, I don't know, $7.25 an hour, right? No. He laughed and he's like, no. I whatever your labor is, I 3 or 4x that. And so, like, let's say, let's say he was charging the customers $25 an hour. He explained it to me very clearly and succinctly, and it all clicked for me. And he said, I charge them $25 an hour. Got to pay you $7.25 out of that. Then there's taxes and insurance and all of that stuff. Whatever's left over, I get to keep. That's my profit. That's my incentive for putting up the insurance, taking the risk, getting the clients and all of that. And I thought, wow, this is the first time anybody's ever explained just how money can multiply through either a product or a service. And so I had that in the back of my head. And then the other thing was, I said, man, I want to be like Bruce. Like, Bruce has more money than my parents do. Bruce seems to have more freedom because of that. And in growing up in lower middle class, it really appealed to me. And it seemed like a way out of that sort of cycle of just lower middle class. Not that there isn't anything wrong with that. Some of the happiest people I know on the planet are of that. But I just didn't want, for some reason, there was a fire inside of me that sort of pushed onward from there. So what I did is I said, well, how can I become Bruce? Oh, I think I would have to learn every trade of the construction that I possibly can. So every single summer up until I was 21, then I would go and work for a different general contractor on purpose, even if I didn't like them, and learn a different trade. I did almost everything but mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. Those are just different specializations that are really outside of the carpentry realm. But foundations, framing, finish for carpentry, all of that stuff. Graduated high school at 18, sort of a mediocre student. Could have been an excellent student, I think, but growing up in a small town of only 500 people, graduating with a class of 20, for me, for somebody who really seeks freedom and only thrives when you have a lot of choice, there was not a lot of choice, right? If you're in a class of 20 people, you're really restricted. I mean, there's basically no electives. So the first time I could have an elective was, I decided everybody was going to college. I had figured out how to sort of monetize going to college. I applied to North Dakota State's College of Science in Wahpeton for building construction tech, which basically teaches you then essentially those final skills, how to be a general contractor. And I excelled at school for the first time, was consistently on the dean's list, really thrived in that environment. And by the time I was done with my getting ready to finish my second year, our capstone project was to build a house. And I got to looking at the blueprints, and I was like, what would happen if I why did the architects make the decisions they did to draw the house and design it in a certain way? Like, as a person who considers themselves a truther and somebody who really seeks the truth in their life and thrives in that way, I was like, well, I don't have any responsibilities yet, in terms of, I don't have a wife, I don't have any children, I don't have a mortgage, I don't have any debt. I figured out how to monetize going to school. I love going to school suddenly. What if I also put on another hat and I also became the architect? And then if I could be the architect, I get paid once. If I can then build what I designed, I can get paid another time. And then, so I applied to North Dakota State University, 70 miles north of Wahpeton, got accepted in their architecture program. Originally, they accept 350 people. And then it gets pared down. It's very competitive, down to 50 students. I made the 50. And then again, it completely excelled because I could choose what I wanted to do. And so graduated at the very top of my class, winning the Peter F. McKenzie Award for the best architectural thesis, and finished up school. It was right at the height of the Great Recession. And so I landed one of the very last internships in Colorado, moved my first wife down here with our 2 children in 2008, and then got laid off nine months later, and fell back on my carpentry handyman work. Never had to take out unemployment. I'm pretty proud of that. And then I ended up landing a few architectural projects, and my business partner, who got laid off at the same time, his name is Al Gore. He was working for Studio Daniel Libeskind in New York City, very famous architect. For anybody listening to this podcast, he did the World Trade Center redesign one. He did the Holocaust Museum in Berlin. Super world renowned, famous guy. Same thing. Laid half his firm off. Alex actually watched the meltdown happen from a high rise in New York City on Wall Street. Literally the stockbrokers coming out with all their belongings, getting laid off from there. And so while I was getting this other work lined up, I said, Alex went to school for 1 year to try to get another extra year to try to get another master's degree in construction management. Finished that. The recession still wasn't over. And I said, hey, what do you, he was tired of living with his mom and dad. And I said, well, how much cash do you got? And he had a couple months worth of cash. And I go, look, the apartment building right above me, or the apartment is kitty corner to mine, is vacant. I think I have enough work for us. Why don't you come down? So we started our firm a decade early, completely unlicensed. We had to figure out all the like what we couldn't do. We couldn't even call ourselves architects back in the day until we got licensure. And so we started the firm in 2010. We starved for about 3 years. Landed some teaching gigs, so the lecturing at CU Boulder, which then pushed us to hire our first employees. And since 2013 to now, we've had a solid decade of growth. We've grown from 2 folks all the way up to 10 people at the firm, from low 6 figures in terms of gross revenue all the way up to 7 figures. We've won many awards. And that's what kind of brings me here today talking to you. Then we started the podcast in 2017 because I wanted to document. That was about in our 7th year. And if everybody, entrepreneurs listening, you've probably heard the statistic. Within the first 7 years of starting your business, that's when you have the highest potential to fail. So we hit year 7 and it was like, I think we made it past the hard part. Why don't we share our story with the world to try to help the younger generation still believe in the American dream, which is still alive, in my opinion, and that hard work and dedication and focus and all of those things are still 100% achievable for you. So that's what we do on our show. We're past 500 episodes right now. I always encourage everybody to start at episode 0 if they want to hear it, like what it was like way back in the day for us to start and grow our businesses.
Wow, what a story. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, I always like to say that entrepreneurship is kind of like the biggest self-development journey that you can be on. So I'm curious, what has your story so far taught you about yourself?
I think it taught me that I actually ended up having something that a lot of folks in my life, including my ex-wife, said that I didn't have, and that was empathy. And I think a lot of the population gets confused of the difference between empathy and sympathy. And so for people that maybe don't understand the difference, empathy, so I read this book, it's called How to Train Your Empathy. And I thought it was brilliant. I read it last year and it finally all clicked for me. And basically the empathy part comes down to, do you have the ability to be a dialectical thinker? So do you have the ability, once let's say you get a client or a new employee or a friend or anything like that, and they tell you a story about their problems, do you have the ability to place yourself theoretically in their position and understand their problems, even if you don't have the problems? That's it. Once you master that skill, you become so powerful because it's not about having sympathy. The problem with sympathy is that I have sympathy for people who are disadvantaged or have had a hard life or something like that. But what do you really gain with the sympathy and helping when trying to help people? Maybe they just understand that you are sympathetic to their problems, but the empathy really allows you to then solve their problems.
That's super interesting. So why do you think people in your life thought that you did not have empathy?
I think I'm type A. Well, I know that I'm a type A person. During the business week, I'm an extrovert. During the weekends, I'm an introvert, and I'm very matter of fact. So I think when people are approached by people like me, it can come off as a little bit more harsh than I think they're anticipating, no matter what you look like. So I think that's always been the confusion. And then where you get, so if somebody comes to me with a problem and I understand it, but I'm not trying to help solve it, I think that's where they go like, oh, he doesn't have any sympathy. And it's like, well, there's sympathy there, but remember, the sympathy part is not about solving problems. That's just about being purely sympathetic, and that's it.
Yeah, I guess I think my husband is kind of similar in that regard. He doesn't. So if someone comes to him with a problem, he might not acknowledge the feeling, or he might not. So I think that's a big step for people. Just if you listen to a problem, just acknowledge that you understand the problem before you jump into solving the problem or sending them to a resource or something. I think that's a huge part of the communication piece that can make things so much easier in relationships.
I agree 100%. I think you just nailed it. That's exactly the issue, is like there has to be a response delay. I think it's just a matter of and it sort of comes down to like you're sort of self-gratifying yourself by not having that delay. Like you need to make the gratification, because the gratification is going to happen on both ends if you can solve the problem. It's just delay that and hear it out for a while and let it marinate.
Exactly. Now, what do you think, which aspects of entrepreneurship have you struggled with the most? Can you maybe share some of the lows and what you did to overcome them?
I would say lately it's been maybe hiring the wrong people. So it's really difficult to know exactly who you should hire and why you should hire and everything. And you could go to business school. You could try certain kinds of training. You could hire professionals who that's all they do is hire people for you, or vice versa. But at the end of the day, the only thing that helps you understand who to properly hire is experience. So no matter what, if you are a beginning entrepreneur starting today, and let's say you're just a one person company, your idea hopefully would be you're going to at least multiply to maybe at least having a personal assistant one day, or a helper, somebody that can fill in for you in that regard. And so no matter what you try to do, I think you're going to make a mistake and eventually hire the wrong person, which then leads to a firing or laying off, or them just leaving on their own accord, which is actually usually the best scenario. But know that you should just be comfortable sitting in the pocket and understanding that you are going to eventually hire the wrong person. It's okay. What's not okay is not learning from that mistake and better positioning yourself for the proper hire in the future.
How much of that is understanding yourself and your communication style and your triggers?
100%. It's 100% about all of that. So I think, let's say, for us to get a little bit more specific, the last couple hires that we had that didn't work out, I think we were lying to ourselves in the sense of, for instance, one of the people, we were not their first choice. You could tell we were their second choice. And I think you have to be, no matter how much you need extra help at this moment where you're trying to hire folks, if you hire out of, you just like, I don't care if we're their second choice, we need somebody to perform the work. They're as soon as they get a chance to have they already have one foot out the door. As soon as they have a chance to actually open the door fully and leave, they will. So you have to be completely honest with yourself in a regard like that. The other one is, you could have two different kinds of companies. You could have a company where maybe everybody's an introvert, and that's completely okay. Maybe the work allows you to be introverts, but you might be like us, where you got to be an extrovert during the week. I'm all about balance in life. And, that's why I go to just pretty much an introvert on the weekends to try to sort of decompress and realign myself and center myself so that I can be that extrovert and get pulled apart all week. That's kind of what happens. I feel like if you're an extrovert and you have to go out there and you're a salesperson, you get pulled apart all week. Your whole being just gets pulled apart, and you have to refocus and everything like that. So you can't make somebody who is let's say they graduated, they're 22, 23, be an extrovert. So I think that's a critical part, is like, do the personalities match up with whoever you're hiring? There absolutely is a personality point that needs to be addressed and made present at the top of your mind when you're hiring folks.
That's so important for sure. Now, I read that you also suffered from burnout at some point, and it's something that it's an experience that I've gone through as well. So I wonder, how long did it take for you to really recognize the symptoms of burnout? And what did you do once you were aware of the situation? What did it feel like for you? Because to me, I think this is one of those situations where it's really clear in hindsight, but while you're in it, I feel it's a slow progression, and you often don't realize the danger you're in.
Yeah, it took me months to figure it out that I was actually, you know what? I would say it was actually, it didn't really solidify for me that I was in a period of burnout until after I was done burning out. And so, being in that pocket of being burnout, my strategy was I just felt compelled to go fishing. I mean, it was just unreal how much the water was calling me. And because growing up in Northwestern North Dakota, like there's only so many activities to do. So growing up in a family that was very outdoorsy, hunters, fishers, farmers, cattle ranchers, that sort of thing, basically country folk, is that, I was, all those kind of values and pastimes were instilled in me. But when I moved to Colorado in 2008 and, had a family, started a little family, and then eventually my wife left, abandoned us for 3 years. And I was taking care of those kids all by myself as a single dad. I mean, your whole plus running the firm and teaching at CU and building stuff and being on television and all these other things is like, I know that my focus is really like, first of all, family, then firm. And I don't really have time for like myself or anything like that. And so, doing that for, let's see, 7, 8 years in a row, waking up every single day at 4 to 5 a.m. and putting in a full 12 to 14-hour day, doing all of those things, then the weekends concentrated on kids alone. I just completely forgot about my passion and one of these releases that I had in life. And so all of a sudden it was 2020, and my children we became the age of, teenagers, and I didn't realize this would happen. My mother has been right the whole time, is that like they're gonna not want to hang out with you after a while. They become their own people, obviously. Like what an idiotic thing that I didn't even think about. And sure enough, they all just, even if we would do fun stuff with them or take them places, they didn't want to hang out with us. So I found myself going, and then my wife's career started to take off too. So instead of her sort of being a half or a little bit more stay-at-home mom, this is my second wife. So we combined families. Her real estate career just started to skyrocket. So all weekends, instead of me hanging out with her while the kids didn't want to hang out with, she was just working. And I found myself going like, well, I just compelled to do this thing. So what I did is I became a very avid hiker. I was already hiked before that, but in Colorado, like where we live, which is in Longmont, Colorado, you are basically on the plains, and everybody thinks Colorado is all mountains. It's not. Half of it's mountains, but not the eastern half. We live on the plains. We can see the mountains. I drive 7 miles. I'm in the mountains, right adjacent to it. But we have these amazing hiking and fishing and outdoor opportunities here. And so I just felt that calling me. And I told my wife this many, many times. I said, my happiest place is going all the way to the top of the world, on a Saturday, a Wednesday, a Sunday, and going up and fishing these lakes that are, 10,000 feet in the air. So you're hiking, you're driving up to maybe 8,000 and you're hiking like 2,000 to 4,000 feet up and down. It's very hard on your body, on your lungs and all of that. But it really became a spiritual thing for me. And I would get, ultimate clarity up there, come back down and be recharged. And I took it to an extreme level where like that would be my Wednesday. I started taking off Wednesdays from work and just doing that all day. And then Saturday, Sunday, and now, a couple years later, it's kind of reeled back in, pun intended. So, I don't have to I still get that fix, but it's not as extensive. So now I've kind of relegated it to instead of every Wednesday off, I do Wednesdays off in the summer, and then on Saturdays I'll do a big fishing trip, and then Sundays is just kind of maybe a local event or something like that. And then my ultimate goal has always been, which I totally forgot about again, was my mother likes to tell this story whenever she talks to my wife or any, former girlfriend or friend or something like that. Like, yeah, when Lance was in second grade, their teacher had him do an exercise where they said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And Lance said, a professional fisherman. I completely forgot about that. And then sure enough, so what I ended up doing was after the first year of me doing that in 2020, in 2021, what I decided was I was like, I should really be filming these journeys and sharing them with other people, because there's a lot of people in the world that physically can't even get up to that level of going at to 9,000 feet in the air, hiking all the way up to 12,000, hiking back down. And like the beauty you see there and the lack of people is just something to behold. I mean, I'm going into the wilderness by myself. So I started fishing with Lance. It's on YouTube and Newsbreak, and I ended up monetizing it. So I don't make a lot of money, but I make enough to pay for like the gas, the trips, the fishing gear, some advertising and stuff like that. So that's kind of my story about burnout and getting through that process.
Yeah, I think reconnecting with nature is something that is so healing. It's something that I found really, really helpful as well. For me, it's going running. So I started to go long distance running, but just being outside and just in nature is so healing. And so it just recharges your body and your soul. So I totally relate to that. Now, were there any other tools or techniques or strategies that you found helpful in that situation, or was it just being outdoor and let nature take over?
Reducing any kind of substances that you think are going to help reduce your burnout by just numbing yourself. So the other thing was we never got to full litigation, but it almost got there in 2019 and 2020. Without going into too much details, there was a lot of lawyers involved. This was on the professional side of things. There's a lot of lawyers involved. And what I turned to was I turned to wine, and I'm happy to admit that I'm a dry person now. I don't think it was out of control to the point where like I was like kicking the dog and beating the wife or anything like that. There was none of that. But what there was for sure was waking up hungover while at the same time being burnt out and then just slogging through the day. So at the ripe old age of 38, it was what it would have been. Is I just said I'm done. Like no more alcohol, like pretty much whatsoever. So that was one of the biggest things, and like why I'm okay with being vulnerable and telling that story for you and your audience is like I just want everybody to know that it's okay if you go through those bouts. Like you are a human, you are not infallible, you are not perfect, you are imperfectly perfect, and so trust me, you can kick those habits, you can move in a positive direction, and the more of those coping mechanisms that you remove from your life, drinking, smoking, any kind of activity where it's basically the next day is a lingering issue for you, then you can do it and you should do it, and that's the way forward. And if it takes you up until 38, fine. If it takes you up until 50, understand that like you're not going to. It's okay if you haven't kicked it by the age of 22 when you're out of college and you're done with the keg parties and the frat parties and all that stuff. Hopefully everybody matures at some point in that way, and that's one of the biggest positive things is I feel great. I have a routine every morning. I wake up somewhere between 4:30 and about 5:30 every day. And the first thing I do is I'll put on a pot of coffee. And while the pot of coffee is brewing and getting ready, I take about 10 to 15 minutes to myself. I pray. I stretch really hard. So as I get older and I do all this hiking and stuff like that, I make sure I stretch. And then I just kind of lay silent for 10 to 15 minutes. I don't open any social media apps or anything like that. And then it prepares me for this golden about 2 hours of time where nobody's bugging me. My wife is still asleep. We only have one child that lives with us at this point. We had four. We're mostly empty nesters, but the dog doesn't bug me. It's just very quiet, very silent, very meditative. And in that first 2 hours of time by myself at my home office is when I'm most productive. We even have an episode on the show that I think is called like Mornings Make Your Life or something like that. So it's focusing on those kind of times. And honestly, the next 8 hours is maybe as productive as those first two. So those are some of the habits, I think, the positive habits that I've tried to make happen in my life, and just make it a routine, no matter how tempted I am to open up Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or even look at text messages from friends. It is really recentering and everything. And the last big one is, and I've done this since forever, and that is, but I used to call it something else. I used to call this habit of scheduling everything just that. I would say, people would say, how are you so productive, Lance? How can you get all these things done? How can you run F9, F12, F14, the nonprofit community garden, teach at CU, raise 4 children, fish like you do the podcast? How can you do all of that stuff? And I said, well, I schedule everything. I even schedule dates with my wife. I schedule haircuts, getting my teeth cleaned, working in the garden and everything. Now what I call it is, and I think this is the way I like to think about it, is I make appointments for myself. Like it's such a simple thing to do, but think about it. It's like, you don't need somebody else to make an appointment for yourself. You need to actually carve out time. And it works. Like, it sounds so simple and so silly, I think, but it's really profound. So like before we started recording here, you asked how my week was going and everything. And I said, look, the last 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, I basically took half days off, and I had it in my calendar, and the event was titled something like Work on Farm, Garden, and Home. And nobody could make an appointment with me then because my calendar was full. And I get the notification after I'm done with the morning of work. I'm like, oh yeah, yep, that's where I got to go. I got to go to the community garden. I got to go to the house. I got to go to our little farm. I've got to do those things. And then those things got done.
Yeah, I love that. Great tips. Thank you so much for sharing. That's very similar to what I do as well. So I put all those things in my calendar as well. Like the gardening and going for a run and all the things that you do for yourself. And I also found that my most productive time of day is the early morning. Mm-hmm. That's also the time that I take for myself, where I do all the things that I really want to do, because I noticed that when I leave them until the end of the day, when I've already run out of energy, they don't get done.
Exactly.
And then I don't do the things that fill me up, and I just burn out over time. So I do them first thing in the morning, they get done, and then all the rest can happen as well.
Yeah, 100%. And make an appointment for yourself. Make appointments for yourself, even if it's the most little mundane stuff. Like go to Home Depot, for example. Like, I got to go pick up this one stupid thing. I wrote it down, and then keep notes. I mean, the iPhone, yes, it's very distracting, or the Android or whatever. But like I always have, I'm a big note taker in terms of just tasks that I need to do, or just little stuff, or if I have a little idea. It could be about an employee, like if I'm keeping track of like things they're doing well, things they're not, children, stuff that I have to do around them, and then coupling that with the calendar. Like if I have one big note it's just called Home Depot, and it's a continual list of things, like just the tiniest stupid stuff that I have to buy for either the house or the garden or myself or anything like that. And then that helps me just stay focused and active and make sure that the things get done, like you said, Claudia.
Is there any other advice that you would like to give to ambitious and mission-driven entrepreneurs who are working way too hard right now?
Oh, I don't think you should be working more than 50 hours a week. The biggest piece of advice I could give would be just passing through the advice that I was given by a gentleman named Robert Wygant, who is the CEO of Sumex Design, where I landed most of my original work, which was just a lot of CAD modeling and stuff for the website ArcCAD. And the most profound advice he ever gave me, and it sticks with me every day, is that you need to figure out how to replace yourself. And you need to be comfortable delegating and letting go a little bit. Otherwise, you are going to be bogged down for the rest of your life with those 50 to 80 hour weeks. And that's no way to live. Because it's like my brother sent me this Instagram reel, I think a day or two ago or something like that, where he's like, you work the whole year to take 2 weeks off. Does this make sense? Does this make sense to you? So if you're an entrepreneur, one of the whole points of you being an entrepreneur is freedom. Like you hopefully you have the on-ramp and the ability for you to gain financial freedom really happens with entrepreneurship versus working with someone else. The same thing goes with time. So you need to get comfortable with delegation, and through delegation, replacing yourself. So whatever your product or your service is, what kind of systems, training systems, working systems, a framework, you want to build a framework that allows you to bring somebody in and repeat you and what you do so that you can have more time to either continue growing the business up until a point where you're like, okay, I'm satisfied. I have 7 employees or whatever your metric is for that. You get to 7 figures, right? And then at that point, it's like, okay, now how can I start peeling myself away from this business if it's sort of on semi-autopilot-ish? So you can start doing the things you love, whatever the other activities that really make life special are. How do you carve more time out for that? And I think it's through replacing yourself, delegation, and those sorts of things.
Yeah, creating those systems that allow you to have more freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So last but not least, where can our listeners find you online if they would like to connect or work with you?
First place would be LinkedIn. I will link in with anybody, even if you are a spammer. Just go to linkedin.com and search Lance Cayko, Lance, last name Cayko. If you want to keep up with everything architecture related to what we're doing, you can go to f9productions.com, sign up for a newsletter. And the last place is InsideTheFirmPodcast.com. Check out, start at episode 0. If you are interested in learning how to start, run, and grow a business, we tell it all. And there's plenty, even though it's architecture and design based, there's plenty of gold little nuggets in there for any entrepreneur, I think, that speak to those sort of fundamentals that we talked about.
Fantastic. Lance, thank you so much for sharing your story and all your insights with us today. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, Claudia. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Take care and talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Wired for Success podcast. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. That's a fantastic, easy, and zero-cost way to help the show grow. Just use the link in the show notes and make my day. If you'd like to take it one step further, you can now join my inner circle and become an official supporter of the Wired for Success podcast. Supporting the show is super simple and will only take about 30 seconds. Basically, it works like any other paid subscription. All you have to do is to go to glow.fm/wiredforsuccess podcast, pay $5 per month or as much or as little as you like, and choose the link of the podcast player you want to use. You can listen anywhere in any app. So for less than the price of 1 to 2 fancy coffees per month, you can really make a difference and help me keep this show awesome. For more tips and info, check out my website at wiredforsuccess.solutions. Thanks a ton and talk to you soon.